I've developed this deep belief that people are not resistant to change. What they're
Yeah.
resistant to is change with shitty implementation.
Yeah, I agree with
Okay?
that. Yeah.
Right? So they want more good change and less poorly managed change.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Culture Talks, where we talk to next gen leaders like my friend, the wonderful Craig Hampson, who we'll introduce a little more completely here in a second. And we talk to these next gen leaders about creating high performance, high contribution organizations with great cultures and ideally better workplaces and what next gen leaders are doing about it. So we get this great perspective of Craig Hampson, who is currently the chief people officer of BURNCO, a large construction services company, headquarters in Calgary, but operations all through North America, family owned business, very well known brand throughout North America in that market. And we're just delighted to have you here, Craig. Welcome to Culture Talks, and where are your feet on the ground right now?
Oh, where? Thank you for Lauren for having me. I'm in Calgary. I'm in my office in Calgary, and yeah, this is
Yeah.
to pull up some. I was down in the U.S. traveling with business and personal, but yeah, it's nice to be home.
Well, welcome back. Welcome back home. And one editorial comment about hockey. For the first time in my life, I'm happy to do a franchise trade. I'll take the Flames over the Oilers right now. You can have them all, the whole damn lot of them anyway. But that's how I'm feeling about things. But that's a sore
Well,
point and a different matter. And
I
let me
I
just
never.
say a little bit about. Of course, you can go on LinkedIn and all the social media and find out about Craig Hampson and his wonderful background. What I've come to appreciate about Craig, in addition to the wonderful human being he is, the great family he has, just the person he is that he's traveled from operations, P&L, and has had that perspective, was a banker for much of his life and a very successful one. I got to know him there. And as he traversed his experience there and got an MBA and then evolved into the wonderful role of leading people and culture for organizations, both in the banking side and now in the construction services side. So, what I just to kick us off, as you sit back and reflect on that journey, what surprised you about this transition? And what do you like about it, and what are do you have any regrets about any of it?
Regrets, no. I mean, lots of lessons. No regrets. I think that everything that I've done has led me to here, and I'm pretty grateful to be, have a great family, friends, support network, and a great work environment. So I don't regret anything that led me to here. I think though that, like most people, plenty of lessons. I think that even as you were describing, so my title's even evolved from chief people officer to chief business enablement officer. So why have some sort of a different title, you know, too? It's because the work that I'm doing is more expansive than what I kind of started out to do. But going back then to your commentary around some of my path, I think I've been very blessed and fortunate to work with some great organizations who have provided me some great opportunities. And I think a lot of my leadership story is around that background in operations. Spent 90% of my career in front of a customer, got some opportunity to develop in other areas, people and culture, digitization, etc. And it kind of led me all to here, right? Like these are all experiences
Yeah.
that build capability over time. And the way I describe it is like for me, what I believe my value is this kind of mix of COO and CPO. Like I don't identify one over the other because I've run the P&L and I've worked at people and culture, strategic support units, building culture, process optimization, now moving in, process optimization, removing some of the friction out of the system, governance, government and stakeholder relations, all of these different pieces, which is why my title's kind of evolved. But it goes back to what I am grateful for, that I've been provided all of these opportunities that have culminated in this breadth of experience that I don't even know how to categorize anymore. All I
Yeah.
know is that it's not just P&L leadership and it's not culture. You don't come in and fix the culture to fix the place. You kind of work at the business in order to help feed and fix the culture and use it as a differentiator too. So you've been a key part of that journey for me, and so I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So I want to pick up on that, Chief Business Enablement Officer. I'm sorry I missed the nuance there, but I want to. So I just got back from teaching my class that I do in Boston every quarter, and I'm really curious around. In that case, I had executives from 10 different countries, about 12 different states, 17 different markets, and all executive levels. But I'm curious about this, and please help me try and understand this. If you go into any research, McKinsey, Deloitte, Great Places to Work, Forrester, anywhere, by and large, a thriving culture, there's all the data that tells you it creates more value, reduces risk, increases adaptability. And yet, when I'm running into top level CEOs and board positions these days, I don't hear people talking much about wanting to invest in culture. I hear them talking about wanting to invest in efficiency, wanting to invest in robotics, wanting to invest in every damn thing. The culture word has become, I don't know if it's become out of favor. I wouldn't say that. It just hasn't, it's just not topical. And that's my observation. And why the hell is that? What's your take on that? I mean, you won't even add it to your title.
Well,
I'm just poking at you there.
well, now I'm going to change my title just to prove a point. But that's really like interesting that you mentioned that, and I feel like there's certainly waves of things. Like there was a time when with business we went through purpose, right? Hey, companies start to identify with a purpose, and then you kind of moved into culture, right? And people and businesses understood the value of culture. I think then there was even a shift to adaptability was another major theme that we've seen. And like I don't know about not thinking about or verbalizing culture as much, but I do think it's still on everybody's mind. And I just think that it's sometimes an ethereal subject that isn't in people's natural wheelhouse. So without making an investment in it specifically, that I think that isn't something that they speak about a lot, because what we know is that culture is best done by design versus default, which means then
Right.
you have to make an investment to do it. And what I've sometimes butted up against or found is that culture is something that people can get behind, but we have to link directly to business performance and human capital metrics, et cetera, in order for it to be any sort of sustainable investment. Because sooner or
Right.
later, you want to make that investment, it's going to butt up against, trade-offs, real trade-offs for operational expense or OPEX and CAPEX even at times. And so without organizations' ability to show the return on investment, I think at times they're likely more to focus on efficiency.
Yeah. So one of the 10 elements that we introduce as a framework for advancing culture, which is we describe as the operating system of the company, the human operating system of the company. It's the iOS or the Windows of any organization. It's the how stuff gets done. And so one of the areas that we really concentrate on being people first is really encouraging leaders to take negative friction out of the business wherever possible, which of course all involves waste and it's very financially, and the outcome of that is essentially financial and people related because it allows and helps people use their time more effectively. And yet, do you think most people would equate that to being a part of the culture initiative, Craig, or would they see that being in competition to it?
Yeah, I don't know as in competition, but I certainly don't think it's a natural connection for most
Yeah,
people. When you think about the element of people first and customer centric, like in using the elements and using that model, I know from personal experience, we sit back and we talk culture and everybody has an opinion on it, and we all violently agree at times there's a problem or an investment to be made. But we know the biggest challenge we have is how do we get towards some sort of implementation, right?
right.
That is the leap to move from intent to implementation. And going back then to using that model as we began to break it down, like people first and customer centric was the number one element that people focused on. So I don't think there's that natural connection, but I think that you and others have been working at making that around, hey, we can have good employee experience programming, but really when the operating system, as you describe it, of the place is difficult to work in, and there's
Yeah,
lots of waste and people feel like they're butting their heads up against the wall, it's natural barriers. Like here's some good examples. Like I look at it, as our operating model and how even when you make the choice to invest in culture, the challenge is your operating model is set up to operate in a different culture, right?
yeah,
So you want to go change the world, but you're actually fighting against the operating model, how decisions get made, right? How things get through the organization. And when those are too hard, what I found and one of my biggest challenges has been is when things are really hard, people either avoid it and don't do it at all, or it can suck the entrepreneurial spirit out of the place by avoiding it and not doing it. or they start to action things on their own and we start to decentralize, not in a good way, where we're actually
Yeah.
doing things differently in cells. And so when we went through this as an organization, the people just resonated with this. Like things are just too hard to get done.
Yeah. Yeah, that this idea of hard is the hard work of the hard work. I think it's really an important topic. Like I have an observation around as we have all this pressure on us to perform and to get things done. When we have to somehow think of things systemically and really kind of think about how organic systems work together, that sometimes it just feels like it's too hard and too complex. And it just, you just go like, screw it. Like, I'm just going to go I mean, right now, I just read an article in I think it was Fortune or the Wall Street Journal or something that said CEOs are now feeling their oats and telling people they're kicking asses and taking names. They're now telling people, they finally feel in the position to go and tell them to get into the office, get back to work, shut up and don't complain and don't, in some ways, I'm thinking, God, that's a hell of a lot easier, don't you think? I
Well, it's
mean,
an easier
why not just do
default,
that?
right? It's a default when things are hard. But here's, and we see the pendulum swing. Going back to one of your first questions around culture and people, this is what I've begun to believe, that culture is actually an amplifier of all your business decisions. So you can
Right.
allocate capital in a way that you can buy all the assets that make your money business. You can improve the quality of your product. You can improve the quality of your service. You can invest in the talent, and go and hire great talent. But I think why it's not naturally intuitive to organizations is what underpins all of that is the reputation of your organization and the culture of your organization. And it's an amplifier and it can amplify the effect of all of your other investments. And that's actually going back to the point, Lauren, that's actually why I think it's so worth investing in, because I just don't think many places do it well. And it's actually when you're with an organization that wants to do it, I see it as a very real path to differentiation.
Yeah, I mean, really, what you're doing is you're investing around how things get done
Yeah.
and how decisions get made, how resources get allocated. Essentially, that's what you're investing in. And yet, so often I hear people go, well, we can't afford to do that because, we need to invest in this technology. And, I can't invest in culture because I got to invest in technology. And I kind of scratch my head and go, what the hell are you talking about? They're not in competition with each other. But I think people are thinking of some program or some consulting fee or something as opposed to, that intentionality and hard work you're talking about.
It is right? It's and I think that you had mentioned complexity, and why you might see it not as prevalent anymore is because of the complexity to it, because it's not naturally intuitive. It's not in the wheelhouse. It requires investment that has trade-off to other operational or capital expenditures. But I think that like it is hard, and that's why I think it's actually, if you have some expertise around it and some commitment, that you can, that's why I think you can actually really differentiate on it. But going back then, even to when you had said leaders are defaulting to just taking a more hardline stance around it's just this. I guess my question for you, Lauren, I see this culture as this, it's not a trade-off to business decisions that make dollars. I have this writing on my whiteboard, which is culture equals dollars plus happiness. I think that it's okay for us to be able to make hard business decisions and still have a great culture. I think
100%.
yeah, it's equated to culture is making our people happy, and there's times we can't make our people happy. I think that people want to be part of a culture that does great business and doesn't have to apologize for making money. That's a measure of success and achievement. I think when you have a great culture, it's just not seen as at the expense of people,
Yeah. Yeah.
with people. And I think maybe, don't you think that's what's missing with some of the leadership's perspective
I do.
today?
And in some ways, I just don't get it. Like, look, you and I have been part of these decisions, Craig. Sometimes you've got to make hard nosed decisions that, you've got to shut a facility or you're doing M&A action or people come and go. You've got to do layoffs. No one is arguing. Good business leaders make those decisions with clarity and value guidance all the time because they've got a fiduciary responsibility for the long-term success and sustainability of the company. It's how do you go about in doing it that is the hard work. I mean, it's easier to send an X message and just says, oh, and turn the system off and say you're gone, then I don't have to think about you, right? I mean, I know you've been with us for 20 years, but we're going to perp walk you out of the building and box everything up
Yeah.
and I'm giving you, I know I'm being a bit provocative, and those are more the egregious behavior. It's how we go about and do this stuff. It's the behaviors underlying it. It's what we stand for, what we believe in,
Right.
and our treatment of human beings, of which we are all part of. That
Right.
to me, I find so surprising, and I get irritated by the default position around, hey, I think we got a little leverage right now, so you know
Yeah.
what, screw it.
And I think that's part of why we'd see it right now, right? It's more of an employer versus employee friendly market.
Yeah,
You see organizations make changes, but I do
I
really
mean,
agree with you there, Lauren.
as crazy as it is, NVIDIA, of course, they only made $31 billion this last quarter, and they're a $5 trillion market cap company, more than Germany and half of
Yeah.
Europe combined. When you think about it, it's ridiculous. But, Jensen, to his credit, has always invested in a thriving culture at NVIDIA when they were just a gaming organization, and now they're the hottest thing in the world, right? And of course, he'll have to make hard decisions when he has to course correct here and that kind of stuff. So, but there are
Mhm.
all kinds of great examples for every Peter Thiel and Elon Musk example, where they think compassion is a human weakness, there's the Jensen, the NVIDIA example, the Cisco example, or other examples of leaders that go and get great EBITDA performance and market cap performance and everything, and overall have a pretty strong, positive, thriving culture.
I think isn't it the point that it's why you have great culture because at times you got to make business decisions and it's how you're agile and adaptable as an organization. I mean, it's why you have culture to create some stability in your organization and when you have to make difficult business decisions that the way you continue with your customers and your workforce is that you can make business decisions and if you have a good culture people know that you're making it for the right reasons and
Right.
you've been scientific in your analysis but very human in your approach and I think
And
that
if you really genuinely believe that people are the source, they will participate constructively if they have. I mean, even though it may cost them, that may cost them their jobs. But if they feel like they're going to be treated with some level of respect and decency and have a chance to have a viewpoint on it, I think they come and they're very supportive of the organization. And why not? They've invested a lot of time in it. I want to change to the topics a little bit to leadership. It's always been challenging to be a leader at every level. It's a practice. You don't just get it, although some people believe it. What's unique what have you noticed differently in the last 5 years or so post pandemic about the pressure on leaders and and how are you trying to navigate that and invest in that, Greg?
well I think that we've been touching a little bit on it. Number one, if you're a leader, you have an obligation not just to the organization but to your people. And I think intuitively know that great leaders are not born, that they're made and they're practiced. And we've already discussed how much the business environment changes. So if the business environment changing, that means there's a variable in the business that's changing that I need to adapt to as a leader. And generally, when I need to adapt, it's not always intuitive for me. So it gets back to the base level investment that I think one of the things that's going well is that the development of leaders and people understanding that it's my obligation to continue to hone my practice and develop. So I've seen a great appetite for leadership development. I think that one of the major trends that we've seen with the rise of technology at an exponential rate is, and we're talking about people as a source of value, that we realize that in organizations that there's not much that we do in silos anymore. Organizations
Yeah.
are networked, they're cross-functional, and so we need to build some cultural capability around collaboration and what it means to show up as an organizational leader versus a representative from my function. And I think
Right.
that's one of the things that we're seeing as challenging right now in the marketplace is that we have a lot of functional experts. Do we have leaders that know how to show up as business leaders at an organizational perspective first, and then going back to some of the development? I don't know, like I feel like there's this kind of fine line or thin wedge between conflict and collaboration. There's a problem in the center of the table to be solved. And I think
Yeah.
that organizations and why you make investment in culture is that then you have diversity that doesn't work against you. You have diversity that works for you. And as leaders, I think the next level for us is more collaboration, organizational focus, as opposed to showing up being an expert in my function.
Yeah. I'm writing a book. This is a shameless plug, and I'm just early days on it, called Front Porch Wisdom: Lessons in Leadership from My Lifelong Journey, kind of thing. Not an autobiography, just more lessons learned around it. And one of the things, the way I begin is that early on as a farm kid, and you've got a little bit of background this way too, I learned around seeing things as a system. When you're a farm kid, you see things systemically, everything's related. It's amazing how many people get function and blinders on and tend to approach the organization linearly. So as a result, those kind of leaders become um, functionally focused as opposed to systemically focused around the flow and movement of across roles and functions. And why is that, do you think? Do you think we have to test or develop somehow for people to think more systemically, or like
Gosh,
like how do we get people to think like that?
right? And so it's that move from functional expertise. And I think some of the why is like, why? Because I learned my function as I grow up in my career. I need to be
Right.
functionally strong, right? And this is what we've seen with leaders too. Then when we don't have great leadership development programs, is we take great functional experts and we promote them into leaders, and it really kind of cements some of this siloing. But it goes back to it's systemic thinking in leadership, but it's certainly the capabilities that are next level as you start to get more into senior management that I'm not sure is we're as actively building. The capability of cultural leadership and understanding culture as a leader that has influence in an organization, the necessary capability of change leadership, because regardless of whether that's operational
Yeah.
change or cultural change, I see that it's not naturally intuitive for us to lead and sponsor change that's complex and not in
Yeah.
our wheelhouse.
Yeah.
And then going back into one of your original points around when there's too many pain points too, that we have to update the operating model and processes, but yet we've developed experts in those processes and that operating model. And so even as we want to change, we're now butting up against the natural barriers of it's not how the place runs. And so I just think that there's a massive investment that needs to be made in cultural capability, change leadership, and systemic thinking.
Okay. So, Craig, I have two more questions that I want to explore in leadership before we have to switch gears here a little bit. One is I want to talk about why organizations put up with toxic leaders. Right now, I guarantee you that if we went around to all the buildings in and around, we could walk just within distances from where we are. We walked in there and asked people, are there leaders there that are, by their definition, problematic, toxic, that, and in most cases, I mean, I know leaders can't be perfect, but I'm talking about actual leaders that make life miserable for people.
Yeah.
And why do we put up with toxic leaders? Like, why don't we why aren't we better at knowing it, confronting it, and then removing them?
I think that you could tell I'm pausing because that's a difficult question, and it's normally a question that I ask Rubis to hear. Here's what I would say in my very pragmatic experience, that I think once you make a decision as an organization around who you're going to be, and let's say that you want to make an investment culturally, reputationally, I don't care what it is. The first step is organizations have to make that commitment that they're going to be better. Okay? Now, what we've talked about in the past before is the hockey stick effect. When you make that declaration, right, that you make
Yeah.
that investment, things can actually feel worse for a while because what you've done is you've raised the bar on expectations, but you haven't yet done the work to really improve yourself as an organization. So you've created an incongruency from your declaration rate from the beginning. And where I'm going with this, Lauren, is why would we put up with toxic leaders? Is because I don't think, that we've always done the work to clarify the vision of what it means to be a leader here and whether we accept toxic leaders. I think that it's easy to take the outliers and get rid of them, but I think there's a lot of toxicity that exists that isn't just apparent on the surface.
Yeah.
And I think that organizations get nervous because we still have to run the place and we don't have another answer sitting in the background. And I think that's what makes organizations nervous, is moving too quickly on some of those. But
Yeah.
once you make that declaration of what you believe as an organization, your people are very quick then to point out where they don't see it. And I feel
Yeah.
like that's a maturity model piece where some organizations, it can be difficult because you've declared what a better outcome than what it is you're getting, and your people call it out on.
Yeah. I think that's a really insightful observation. And I'm not even talking about that group that's kind of that I would call developmentally at the fringe. I'm talking about the more egregious extreme people. Like, so I just mentioned I just finished teaching this class, and there's a CEO there, and the next morning I said, what's an insight from yesterday? And the CEO of this company said, literally, he goes, Lorne, I hate you. Because when you talked about great, not perfect leadership and that we have to remove toxic leaders, I have someone on my team I know is toxic, and it bothered me all the way home. And I drove here this morning knowing that I've got to move that person out. I know I do, but it's uncomfortable. I don't like it.
There's
I know this person. I don't want to do, but and my observation is that that individual, you're going to be kinder to that individual because I think they probably know they're struggling too, or they're not fitting it. But the organization is going to yell eureka when he does it.
Yes, I think that there's a like when you make that declaration and when you do it, it is a loud signal to the organization. I just
Yeah,
think that organizations are challenged to be that bold in that decision making early in their journey because they don't know yet what the answer is on the other side. Those people hold a lot of operational and functional knowledge, a lot of institutional memory, a lot of relationships.
yeah,
And I think what that's what leaders, more than fear of the conversation, I think that's what more senior
yeah,
leaders kind of hold back on is like, am I ready yet to face the outcome
yeah,
potentially more externally?
yeah,
I don't know, I'm just guessing. But what I find difficult, Lauren, is yeah, when you make that decision, but we haven't put in all the work yet. I mean, because a toxic leader is different than a developmental
yeah, yeah,
leader.
yeah. It is. Yeah,
But yeah, you have to draw a line in the sand and say, hey, when are we going to stop putting up with this? And I think that's one of the first things that shows your level of commitment in an organization. But I love that that person says, I hate you, Lauren, because you are a catalyst for movement for me that I'm not
yeah,
comfortable with yet. I know
yeah.
I felt that. I felt that. And I've given me like, Lauren.
I want to now talk about the beleaguered, beat up middle manager. Many of them are people on this call that are listening to this are in that role. And the middle manager's always taken a kicking from everybody. But in the last few years, more than ever, you got the Andy Jassies of the world, for the CEO of Amazon, saying we got to take 15,000 of these middle managers out and we're going to double their reporting relationship from 15 to 30 to 1. We've got people like Zuckerberg saying all these middle managers at Meta suck. We're paying them too much and we're not getting value out of them. And you look at middle managers, and the data is that it's the lowest scores of middle managers feeling like less valued, underappreciated. And it's kind of like we're saying to them, you know what, we really want you to come in and work twice as hard because we're going to increase your obligations. And oh, by the way, would you mind replacing yourself with AI while you're at it? And
Right.
I just don't get it. Like, I don't like why, like, what are we missing with this group?
Well, there is no doubt that the middle management group has been challenged. Organizations have with the effectiveness of middle management, or middle management has with the effectiveness of organizations, this drive for efficiency. I hear you on all of it. What I feel like is middle management is where the ineffectiveness of your organization shows up. So what middle management does is overcomes all of your crappy processes, all of your lack of, of institutional knowledge. They bring the operational component to the, or like the operational expertise to the table. I think that middle management, their strength has often been maximizing what could be a dysfunctional environment or maximizing ineffective processes. And I think that we've also then got middle management. What I've heard from them is, yeah, there's a lot of pain points that I want to remove from the system so I can be more effective. There's a couple of barriers to that for me. Number one, do I have any decision making or input into the organization, and are they listening to me, and do they
Yeah,
understand my problem?
yeah,
That's one. The other one is that, I feel like they're in the development trap, right, Lauren? So I feel like we've got technical and functional experts who we're actually, as organizations, want to have more elevated capability from by way of not only do I run the place, because there's a heavy baseload component to middle management,
Yeah.
but we want them to structure and fix the place and provide some strategic value. But we haven't necessarily built that level of capability with them, nor do they have the capacity to get to structure and fix and strategic when they're so busy just operating the place
I
every day.
completely agree. You know, the phrase that I hate, I literally have come to hate it, and not a too strong of a term, is you can fix that off the corner of your desk.
Right.
Bullshit, you can. You know, we got these major processes, and we started talking about things systemic. So they tend to run across, right? And then we say to a middle management group, go fix all this stuff. Oh, by the
Yeah.
way, do it on the corner of your desk while we give and you know, rather than just concentrating a group of people in a sprint or something and go and kill this thing, we let it go on and on and on, and we expect somehow it's going to change. I think you're absolutely right. I don't think I think we've got the wrong misalignment on expectations and structures and systems to address modern problems through that organization structure of functional middle management.
I completely agree. And this is where our discussion begins to kind of go back to past points, right? Around we've got dysfunction either culturally or operationally, and middle management overcomes all of that stuff. And then we also expect them to fix things off the corner of their desk. But then we're also fighting at that point in time against the operating model, which is built to run in that dysfunctional environment. And as we especially become more spread out, like for example, the company I'm with now is spread out over 2 countries, right? It's
Yeah.
difficult to get in a room and solve problems together. The decision making generally kind of goes up the line in these organizations. And then going back to the other point, there's not many problems that can be solved without putting operations, IT, finance, HR, marketing at the table.
Yeah.
And we're not set up in our operating
Yeah.
models yet to necessarily. So I think some of the answer, though, Lauren, is the development of middle management with more advanced leadership skills, which is more organizational and more than functional expertise. I think that, we also, where was I going with this? Shoot, I did have a point. Make this look good at some point in time.
Well, you know what? I think your point though around having all these different kind of it can't if it's a meeting all the time, Greg, right? If you want to solve a problem and it gets to be a meeting and people got to get on a plane or they got to travel somewhere and it has to be a committee and they have to get together for 2 days somewhere to do something. It's too damn long in the world we live in. You know, like there's
Yeah.
a book that's come out called The Octopus Organization, and it's kind of more moving from kind of we still have a lot of command and control historical structures that are based on old line, machine mechanistic assembly line systems. Whereas we need these rapid ways of getting people together using technology and platforms to put together to do rapid decision making and solving that, don't require the 24 people in a room with three pizzas and 3 days. And so I think your point around we just need to reinvent ourselves around this. And people like you, I think, are breaking the mold around how the hell we make that happen.
Well, I appreciate that. There's certainly just pieces that are trying to attack differently. I think that there's also what I've identified. So again, if you've got this operating model that runs the place and runs the base load and operational of the place, which we rely on middle management to do, and then their entrepreneurial spirit can get sucked out by the fact that I'm fighting against a machine. But I think that's where organizations can really step in with better listening skills, because those are the people who know the most about the pain points that we're experiencing. And then you can sometimes centrally put the right expertise at the table to go validate out with middle management, as opposed to have them do it off of the corner of their
All right. So I want to challenge you on this because I am so struck by this. I'm so bitten by this right now in a positive, passionate kind of way because I'm a big fan of leaders going out and listening, right? I love
right.
it. I like that. And yeah, I think you have to do that. The end with that is that it's so pedestrian these days. Like, for example, and so we have digital platforms right now that, let's say that you've got I'm talking about a fictitious organization, but ones that I know that have some sort of a retail outlet somewhere
Mhm.
that is, I mean, it is possible right now. Let's say you have 25 people working in that retail and you have two leaders, it's possible for any operating leader right now daily to know exactly how those people are doing, what's in the way, how they're feeling, what they can do to. And now the traditional way is, you would have your quarterly meeting, you'd get the regional leader to go out there and meet with them. You'd report out from that group. You'd look at all the numbers. You'd look at all the numbers and you go, I wonder why that one retail outlet is just not going to cover enough and that one's underperforming. And these things take like quarters and sometime years to address. We can be doing that daily. We can do it daily with digital platforms. Why are people resisting that? Why wouldn't you just jump to the pump and have on everybody's phone everywhere an immediate understanding of how people were doing and how they're. I don't get it. I literally don't get it, Craig.
So just going back to who do you think is resisting it?
I think it goes like this. I think the CEO kind of gets the pitch. Let's say the CEO gets the pitch. And I'm talking to, by the way, a founder of a company who's got a company like this, who spent 10 years at MIT and his co-founder 10 years at Google Search, got a company like this. So they come in and they make the pitch. And the CEO goes to his operating person and to his HR person, goes, let's try this. Let's pilot this. And it kind of goes like this. Well, thank you very much for the presentation. And the next thing, the HR person walks in and goes, you know what? We've got this other platform we're building right now on benefits. And geez, you know what? I think this could cause a little bit of a distraction. And then the IT guy walks in and goes, I wonder if the security thing on this thing is as solid as I think it is. And not everybody has a phone, And what are we going to do about that? And then the marketing person goes in and goes, the branding on this thing is not exactly in our branding. And pretty soon the CEO goes, fuck it. It's not worth it. Sorry.
Have you been sitting in my office? No, I'm just not. But first, there's a couple of things here for me, Lorne. Number one, what I'd say is from a change perspective, look, I've developed this deep belief that people are not resistant to change. What they're resistant to is change with shitty implementation.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Right? So they want more good change and less poorly managed change, right? And even our most heavy optimizers and experts in the business at running things a certain way, they know our biggest pain points and they are very willing to change and are demanding some change in things. What they need to know is, why it's being done, how it's being done, when it's going to be done, and how am I trained, right? And so I think there's a change management piece there. And I think that, but the other thing around the listening, going back then to the listening, is we go out and we figure out these pain points. There's people who are experiencing pain points don't always have that more systemic view of how things get through an organization and what's required for a digital solution. The other learning that I've had is that digitization has been hard for organizations because the technologist in the business doesn't speak the same language. And so organizations that are getting this right, are coming up the middle with digitization, with putting business leaders and technologists at the same table and helping translate what the art of the possible is with what our problem is and how we want to get it done. But I think the good news, Lorne, is the good news is that these digital properties are getting far more easily implemented and they're not just ripping the guts out of your entire system. That's what I think has created massive paralysis in organizations, is because, to your point, you can't just fix one thing. You take the Band-Aid off and all of a sudden it just got so complex that it was.
Yeah, there's a thread there. That's the other side of it. You're absolutely right. You're pulling a thread. That is a really insightful comment. And the other thing about, for sure, that I've come to agree with you around change is that if I have to make a choice and I'm uncertain, I'll take the old way.
Yeah.
Because at least I know the old way. And even if all this promises with the new way, if it's too uncertain, I'll stick with the old way because I know how to work around the pain. Okay, this is the last kind of wrap up kind of stuff. I've got 20 emerging executives in the room. They're all ready to take on their next role. Craig Hampson walks in and they put their hands up and they go, Mr. Hampson, if you had to give me, as I evolve to my next more advanced leadership, what advice would you give me in terms of my character, my leadership character to invest in, to grow and develop? I'm not talking about my technical competence. I know I've got to become digital and blah, 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 and agentic and all that stuff. But tell me about my character, Craig. Tell me what I need to reinvest in, recommit to, based on your insight around advancing and making a contribution as a senior leader?
I wasn't warned that you were going to ask me such a difficult and, what should be insightful question.
I just made it up as we were talking.
What I go back to is a couple of things that I speak about as I get an opportunity to teach, especially because I think people, first thing that I would generally say, Lauren, is the person that is asking me that question is likely largely on the right path because they're asking the question to begin with. Where we struggle is with people that don't necessarily ask that question. Because if somebody's asking that question, they're curious, they're growth oriented, they're success oriented, they're help me learn. That's the first piece, so that we know the impact of growth mindset and curiosity. So if you have a developing leader asking that question, man, you've got somebody with generally the right character traits
Yeah.
to begin with. I think a few points of emphasis for me, in my opinion, what I have seen people do really well with is, look, we all are different, and that embracing the cognitive diversity on a team, usually in environments that don't function that well, it's usually that diversity can pull it apart versus diversity is a strength and pull it together. We all have different levels of EQ and,
Yeah.
analysis, etc. So I'd embrace the value of that cognitive diversity. I think that I would want leaders, especially as they're developing, if they want beyond mid-management, to really focus in on their EQ and their emotional quotient, which ultimately is what is needed for good cultural leadership, good change leadership, because we know that if we're experiencing massive amount of change, I think this is one of the things where we've underinvested in leaders, their cultural capability and their ability to lead change in an organization. So that requires real emotional quotient investment. And then I'd go back to that idea of, your leadership equals dollars plus happiness. And if we can figure out some way to balance people leadership and business leadership and develop both of those capabilities, we can be both scientific in analysis and make great business decisions. But we know that we're going to be able to be human in our approach, leverage the value of what our people are, and do it in an environment where humans are the source of value, which is really, if we can start focusing on that component, which to me comes back to EQ, culture, and change leadership capability.
That's a great and helpful response. And I'm going to wrap it up with this last question
Okay.
that literally was asked of me by about let's say, just to give you a little bit of a 32-year-old technology leader, had worked for a couple of companies already and come to Harvard. He goes, Lorne, one of the reasons I've come to this class is because I'm wrestling with this question. Why, with all the signals out there in the marketplace, do I have to invest in thriving and helping others thrive when really the message I'm getting is win lose, baby? Just take it and win and stick it to the other person, because you know what? If it's not me that if I don't throw them under the bus, they're going to throw me under the bus. I'm literally the question. How would you respond?
I think about a couple of things. Number one, I would think, going back to character, what do you want to be? What character do you want to exhibit as a leader? Like, are you fine with win-lose, right? I'm sure that you can go make a decent living somewhere.
Yep.
In a lose mentality. So there's no, it's even the same as culture, right, Lauren? Every place has a culture.
Yep.
Now, there's choices that we make and curate to that choice, right? It just wouldn't be for me a win-lose, reality. But if they want to, that's great. So when I think about that, when I said two things, I work right now for a 113-year-old organization, legacy organization, multi-generational. And what I love about that is that success and wins are measured in years and decades and not measured in quarters.
Yeah.
And so what we want to work with is, if this is the type of organization you want to be, you don't win by quarters and you don't win at the expense of other people, because that's not how you think about sustaining a 113-year-old business. I don't think anybody who thinks win-lose in that way would get there. The other part of it goes back culturally. And one of the things that we've talked about in the past, that, if you're the LA Dodgers, you can think win-lose and go out and spend $1.3 billion on a pitching staff and go win a World Series. But that doesn't always work for you either. And how many organizations have $1.3 billion laying around to do it? Would you rather be that, or would you rather be the Blue Jays? Now, the outcome was a World Series for the Dodgers, But think about what that story and culture and its success was and how it felt with the Blue Jays. You talk to them about how disappointed they were with the not winning the World Series, like ultimately disappointed. But what did they all talk about? It was the greatest experience of their lives.
Yeah,
And I
right
think
on.
that's what I would like to talk about. What part of environment do you want to be in? Do you want to be
Yeah.
in that win loss, or do you want to be in something that's going to change your life?
You know what I want to do? I want to walk in that dugout and put that jacket on. That's what I want to do.
Right.
Hey, Craig,
Yeah.
you're one of the, seriously, I mean this from the bottom of my heart, not only a friend, but one of my most admired leaders. I've had the privilege of watching you grow and watching your career grow. I
Yeah.
love the way you think and the way you get things done. And thank you for contributing to this and to our audience. I just love hanging out with you and have a great holiday season and all the best to you and your family. On behalf of Garrett and myself and the whole crew, thanks so much.
Thanks, Lauren. It is my pleasure and an honor. And what's ironic, and I think that your audience might kind of agree with the two, that you're asking me questions that are normally some of the things that I want to be asking you. But this what makes you great is that you don't just come to table with a point of view, like you want to learn. And when we sit down.
All right. Talk to you soon, Craig. Bye for now. Thanks, everybody.